Sinimula ni Brother Khalil Jaffer ang talakayan sa pamamagitan ng pagninilay sa istruktura ng lipunang pantao. Ipinaliwanag niya na ang bawat tao ay isang indibidwal, subalit ang mga indibidwal ay nagsasama-sama upang bumuo ng mga pamilya. Ang mga pamilyang ito ay lumalago tungo sa mga tribo at etnisidad, na kalaunan ay nagiging mga kapitbahayan at komunidad. Sa huli, ang mga komunidad na ito ay bumubuo ng mga pamahalaan. Sa loob ng mga estrukturang ito, laging may mga indibidwal na naghahangad ng pamumuno, yaong gumagabay at nagbibigay direksyon sa iba. Hindi ito nagkataon lamang. Sa halip, ito ay sumasalamin sa isang malalim na katotohanan ng kalikasan ng tao. Tayo ay nilikha na may pangangailangang mamuno o pamunuan. Bahagi ito ng ating fitrah, ang likas na pagkatao na naghahanap tayo ng gabay, ng isang imam na isang magtuturo ng direksyon. Kahit ang mga grupong tila tumatanggi sa pamumuno ay sa huli ay bumabalik din dito. Ipinakita ito ni Brother Khalil sa pamamagitan ng mga halimbawa sa kasaysayan, kung saan maging ang mga nagsabing walang pinuno kundi si Allah ay napilitang magtalaga ng mamumuno para sa panalangin, organisasyon at mga pagpapasya. Sa makatuwid, ang pamumuno ay hindi maiiwasan sa bawat antas ng buhay, mula sa pamilya hanggang sa pandaigdigang sistema. Gayunpaman, ang mahalagang tanong ay hindi kung umiiral ba ang pamumuno, kundi anong uri ng pamumuno ang naghahari sa atin. Upang makamit ng tao ang tunay na kaganapan at espiritual na pagbabanyuhay o ang estado ng paru-paro, ang ating mga pinuno ay dapat nakaangkla sa fitrah. Ibig sabihin, sila ay ginagabayan ng kanilang ugnayan kay Allah, hindi ng makamundong pagnanasa. Ang pinunong nakaugat sa fitrah ay gumagawa ng pasya batay sa banal na gabay, laging nagtatanong, ano ang nais ni Allah sa usaping ito? Ang ganitong pamumuno ay hindi lamang nagpapataas sa pinuno, kundi itinataas din ang buong lipunan tungo sa espiritual na paglago at kaganapan.
And tonight we want to talk about Fitrah and Tabi'a in society and in governments. To begin with, we want to say that each one of us is an individual, but we come together as individuals and create families. Then these families go on and create tribes, ethnicities, and these tribes and ethnicities create neighborhoods, which create communities. And these communities then come together and form governments. And the world moves on the basis of some individuals within these governments, within these communities, that vie with each other for positions of leadership so that they may guide and lead the rest of that society. And this is because humans by nature cannot do without leadership. It is within our fitrah that we want to either lead or be led, that we need an imam, that we need a guide. That is why even the Kharijites, when they opposed Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and said, La hukma illa lillah, that no one is our leader except Allah. Then when they sat amongst themselves, they said, well, now it's time for salat. Who is going to lead the prayers? We need to collect donations to prepare our army to fight Ali. Who is going to collect the money? Who is going to decide the strategy? So at every decision in our lives, there has to be someone to take leadership and the rest will follow. And that is why we see this idea of leadership in all these different stages from individuality onwards. Even within a family, there is sometimes a contest for power, and typically one might be the one leading the family, or there might be a sharing of power where one family member makes certain decisions and the other one takes charge of other matters within that family. Then within communities there will be leaders, within neighborhoods there will be leaders, within governments there will be leaders. Now, for human beings to attain this perfection that we have been talking about, this spiritual metamorphosis to take place, for human beings to complete their destiny, it is necessary that their leaders be fitrah oriented, that their leaders be driven by attachment to Allah rather than attachment to other than Allah. And the reason why it is necessary is because, as we have said, fitrah is loyal, it is fixed on one principle, and that principle is surrender to Allah. Therefore, all decisions that will be made first to see what does Allah have to say about this matter. If the leader is fitrah oriented, he will always make decisions based on Allah's will. And by doing so, he will therefore be helping those he leads to evolve spiritually. Tabi'a, we said, has no loyalty. Tabi'a is driven by desire. Tabi'a is fluid in nature. It will take the shape of the vessel that contains it, just like water. If you put it in a round container, it will take a round shape. If tomorrow you put it in a square container, it will take a square shape. It therefore has no loyalty as such. So when the leader is tabi'a driven, he will not look at what Allah has to say. He will first see that my tabi'a seeks fame, seeks prestige, seeks wealth. Therefore, whatever will help me get that, I will govern based on that. I will first see what it is that is to my benefit, and then others will comply to that. Now, the human ego is very clever. It knows that tabi'a does not understand higher principles like justice and freedom and human rights and the kind of things that we crave after our physical needs have been met. So what it does is, it speaks of the values of fitrah, but it does not speak of its own nature or of tabi'a. In other words, it masks tabi'a with something that looks like fitrah but is not fitrah. It does by speaking of good values but does not speak of the opposite. And I will give you examples of this. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi shows us this idea that when a government or a leader is driven by tabi'a, they will speak of noble values, they will speak of justice, but they will not speak of injustice. They will speak of freedom, but they will not speak of tyranny, because if they do that, you might notice that these qualities apply and fit perfectly on them. So they will mask that and hide that. He unmasked the Banu Umayyah by saying the Banu Umayyah allowed people to talk about Iman, but they did not allow them to talk about shirk, so that when people see it, they do not recognize it. And this is why today you will find that there are many people who claim to love the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, but they don't follow them. Because they have one side, they don't have the other. They are very happy to praise the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam and to talk of them highly. But if you ask them to curse the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they will hesitate. If you ask them to curse those who hurt the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, they will hesitate. Because there is a generation after generation of this indoctrination that you only talk of good values, but whatever is wrong, you mask it, you hide it, you do not bring it out. And this is why many of us get confused. We know the truth, but we do not know falsehood. You see, after the wafat of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the Muslims never fought amongst themselves in battle. There was never a civil war until the battle of Jamal during the time of Amir al-Mu'mineen. That was the first civil war in Islam. So for the first time, Muslims found themselves standing in battle against their own brethren, against other Muslims. The Muslims of Kufa were standing against the Muslims of Basra. Here they had Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. There they had eminent companions like Talha and Zubair and the wife of the Prophet Aisha. So a man comes to Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam and says to him, "Oh Ali, I love you, I follow you, you are my Imam. But if you think that I will raise my sword and cut my fellow Muslim brother, you are mistaken. These are Muslims, they pray, they fast. I will not fight and kill my fellow Muslim brother." What was the reply that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam gave him? He said, "You do not have to fight for me, but this much know. You have seen above yourself, but not below yourself. You have seen truth and recognized it, but you have not seen falsehood and recognized it. In other words, you have seen me, truth, and recognized it, but you have not seen falsehood and recognized it. If the Prophet brought the Quran, I am the tafsir of Quran. If he fought for Islam, I will fight for Iman." So it is as important to know injustice as it is to know justice.
Inihambing naman ni Brother Khalil ang fitrah sa tabi'a. Ang fitrah ay matatag, tapat at nakasentro sa iisang katotohanan, ang pagpapasakop kay Allah. Hindi ito nagbabago-bago. Ang mga pasya nito ay pare-pareho sapagkat nakaugat sa banal na kalooban. Sa kabilang banda, ang tabi'a ay pabago-bago at pinatatakbo ng pagnanasa. Wala itong matibay na paninindigan. Tulad ng tubig, hinuhubog nito ang sarili ayon sa sisidlang kinalalagyan. Nagbabago batay sa sitwasyon, oportunidad at pansariling kapakinabangan. Kapag ang pinuno ay pinamahalaan ng tabi'a, ang mga desisyon ay hindi na batay sa katotohanan, kundi sa pansariling interes, kasikatan, kayamanan, prestihiyo, at kapangyarihan. Ang ganitong pinuno ay hindi naglilingkod para kay Allah, kundi para sa sarili. Mas mapanganib pa rito, ang tabi'a ay hindi nagpapakita ng tunay nitong anyo. Ang ego ng tao ay tuso. Binabalutan nito ang tabi'a ng wika ng fitrah. Nagsasalita ito tungkol sa katarungan, kalayaan at karapatang pantao, ngunit iniiwasang ilantad ang kawalan ng katarungan, pang-aapi at katiwalian. Ipinaliwanag ni Brother Khalil na ang ganitong piling paglalahad ay nagdudulot ng kalituhan. Naririnig ng mga tao ang marangal na mga pagpapahalaga, ngunit hindi sila tinuturuan kung paano makilala ang kasinungalingan. Dahil dito, maaaring makilala nila ang katotohanan kapag nakita nila ito, ngunit nabibigong tukuyin ang kabaligtaran nito. Inilarawan niya ito sa isang pangyayaring historikal sa panahon ni Imam Ali alayhi salam, nang unang nagharap sa labanan ang mga Muslim laban sa kapwa Muslim. May isang lalaking nagpahayag ng pagmamahal kay Imam Ali, ngunit tumangging lumaban sapagkat hindi niya maunawaan ang sitwasyon. Sumagot si Imam Ali alayhi salam sa pamamagitan ng pagtukoy na nakikilala ng lalaki ang katotohanan, ngunit hindi niya nakikilala ang kasinungalingan. Malinaw ang aral. Hindi sapat na maunawaan ang katotohanan, kailangan ding makilala ang kasinungalingan.
We need to understand that Fitrah-oriented leaders work on a fixed principle. Because they are only concerned about what Allah wants, they are as comfortable talking about injustice and condemning it as they are comfortable talking about justice and praising it. Whereas Tabi'a-oriented leaders, because they are fluid, they have no loyalty, they are flexible on their principles. Therefore, they will only talk and praise that which is good. They will not talk of that which is ugly because they seek to mask it with that which is good. A Tabi'a-oriented government or society will only be driven by material needs, because Tabi'a by its nature is concerned with physical pleasure and material pleasure. That is why when a government is primarily Tabi'a, the yardstick of people's happiness is largely the economy. And the leaders of that government are only concerned with ensuring that the economy is doing well. Why? Because good economy means people are happy in their physical needs. What they seek for their physical needs and pleasure is being met. As long as the people are happy with their physical needs, they will keep me in power. I will continue to get votes. I will continue to get re-elected. And this is a typical sign of a Tabi'a-oriented government, that when you vote, you do not look what is the principle on which this individual stands. What are his moral values? Does he have integrity? You merely see, can he reduce my taxes? Can he create more jobs? Any scandal he's involved in, that's his personal problem. I don't care the values and principles on which the country and the government I live in is based. All I care is that I continue getting my benefits, that I continue getting my physical needs being met. So governments who are Tabi'a-oriented know that this is people's need, and that most people, because they are driven by addictions and attachments to physical pleasure and material needs, they keep them drugged with that. They continue to pander towards that Tabi'a of people. What is it you want that will keep you happy and silent, so that you will not ask for questions that have to do with fitrah, that you will not ask, why is my government giving my tax money to support an unjust government to bomb innocent civilians in another land? You should not concern yourself with that. Stay busy with your work. Think about how to make more money, how to get the latest gadgets, how to be happier in your physical needs. What is it you want? You want us to allow abortion? No problem. You just vote for me. We cancel abortion. What does Allah think about it? Doesn't matter. What else do you want? You don't want capital punishment? No capital punishment. You want gays to have the right for marriage? No problem, we give you that. So whatever your needs are, as long as your tabi'a is met, and whatever you see as a physical need is being fulfilled, I will give it to you, so long as you vote for me. We said tabi'a wants reward. So it becomes, you scratch my back, I scratch your back. You want physical needs? I will make sure you have whatever you want. I will change the rules. Disregard what God wants. Just don't let your fitrah speak. I give you your physical needs, you give me my physical needs, which is the power that I seek. Now, the moment your fitrah begins to speak, I am one individual, there are hundreds of you here, I am leading you. I'm trying to make sure that I'm catering to the majority here and fulfilling their physical needs so that I remain here above you in power. The moment a group of you stand up and your fitrah begins speaking and saying, wait a minute, you are keeping us drugged and addicted. What about injustice? What about freedom? What about human rights? Now, I have two choices. One is I can suppress you and oppress you, because tabi'a flees from pain and seeks pleasure and fights for survival. One way to fight for survival is to squish and to kill any opposition. So I can oppress you. But if I'm smart, and I've seen what happened to Saddam and what happened to Gaddafi and what happened to others, then I know that if I oppress you, it's not going to work. Because if I oppress a group here, it's only a matter of time before a group stands here and starts shouting the same thing. Because fitrah is infectious. Once one starts, others will start speaking. So the better option is, instead of suppressing and oppressing you, because I am tabi'a oriented and your fitrah is waking up, I bring in something that looks like fitrah. I mask tabi'a with a wrapper and a cover of fitrah, so that you begin to think that I have given you and answered your fitrah. People by their nature, in a fitrah-driven system, people want to be led by a leader who is fitrah oriented. In their essence, in their divine nature, they want a leader who is surrendered to Allah, who is concerned more about what Allah wants and not even by their own will, because they know this is necessary for their spiritual growth. Justice is important to them. Freedom is important to them.
Iniuugnay ni Brother Khalil ang talakayang ito sa makabagong konteksto. Ipinaliwanag niya na ang mga pamahalaang pinapatakbo ng tabi'a ay sinusukat ang tagumpay batay sa material na kasiyahan, paglago ng ekonomiya, kaginhawaan at pisikal na kapakanan. Hanggat natutugunan ang pagnanasa ng tao, nananatili silang kontento at hindi na nagtatanong tungkol sa mas malalim na moral at espiritual na usapin. Gumagana ang ganitong sistema sa isang transaksyonal na modelo. Tuparin mo ang iyong pagnanasa at mananatili ako sa kapangyarihan. Ang mga pinunong pinapatakbo ng tabi'a ay inaangkop ang kanilang mga polisiya upang mapunan ang kagustuhan ng publiko, kahit pasalungat ito sa banal na patnubay. Ang mga prinsipyong moral ay nagiging pangalawa na lamang sa popularidad at kontrol. Kapag nagsimulang magising ang mga tao kapag ang kanilang fitra ay nagsimulang magtanong tungkol sa kawalan ng katarungan, tumutugon ang mga sistemang ito sa dalawang paraan. Una, pagsupil at pang-aapi. O ikalawa, mas mapaninlang na paraan, ang pagbabalat kayo ng tabi'a bilang fitrah. Inilarawan ito ni Brother Khalil sa isang makapangyarihang metapora, ang pacifier. Kapag umiiyak ang panloob na fitrah para sa katarungan, kalayaan at katotohanan, ang sistema ay nagbibigay ng kapalit. Mga bagay na mukhang kalayaan ngunit idinisenyo upang ilihis ang atensyon at panatilihing umaasa ang tao. Ang mga distraksyong ito ay kadalasang nasa anyo ng walang limitasyong aliw at material na kalayawan. Hanggat abala ang tao rito, nananatiling tulog ang kanilang fitrah. Ngunit kapag humihingi ang tao ng mas malalim na katotohanan tungkol sa katarungan, pang-aapi o pananagutang moral, biglang nawawala ang mga kalayaang iyon. Ipinapakita nito na ang ibinigay ay hindi tunay na kalayaan, kundi isang kontroladong ilusyon.
If a leader is fitrah-oriented, on the other hand, we talked about a leader being tabi'a-oriented, where he masks tabi'a with fitrah just to fool the masses. If a leader was fitrah-oriented, whether it is at a community, or whether it is a government, or whether it is a family or a neighborhood, whatever it may be, he will never bend, because fitrah does not bend, it is on a fixed principle. He will never change this principle of his, that I will not violate my surrender to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If the masses are all tabi'a oriented and he alone is fitrah oriented, he will still not bend. What he will do is he will give people a choice and say, oh people, you either join me and surrender with me and become fitrah oriented, or he will say what Ibrahim said, Ya qawmi inni bari'um mimma tushrikun. Oh my people, I disassociate myself from what you associate with God. So the addictions that you seek, I will not be your leader and fulfill that need for you. If you wish me to lead you, it will have to be fitrah oriented. Okay, so a fitrah-oriented will not bend on this principle. Now, we said that tabi'a-oriented leaders will cover tabi'a with a fitrah mask. And you will remember that discussion of Musa alayhi salam in the drinking of the real milk versus something that is not his mother's milk. Yeah, when a tabi'a-oriented leader masks tabi'a with fitrah, what he does is he gives us a pacifier that looks like fitrah. Now, pacifiers, as you know, can be very addictive. So it looks like we are being given freedom. It looks like we are being given choice. Freedom of choice, but that is not really the aim behind it. The aim is to drug and addict, and that is why you will notice that it is only the matters that serve our physical needs and give us unlimited and unrestricted pleasure that is given to us in the name of fitrah. For example, when we want to have nightclubs, when we want to have massage parlors, when we want to have beer stores, when we want to have unlimited access to pornography, the government will give that to you. Because that keeps you drugged, that keeps you addicted to your desires, that ensures your fitrah does not hold the reign on your tabi'ah. And if you can be addicted to material pleasure, then your fitrah will not wake up. If your fitrah does not wake up, you will not oppose those in power. But if your fitrah was to wake up, and if you were to demand something that did not have to do with physical pleasure, then suddenly those very same values that you are being told, human rights, freedom of choice, will be taken away. Do you see how tabi'ah is fluid? You put it in a round container, it becomes round. You put it in a square, it becomes square. It has no fixed principle. So tabi'ah wears a mask. It has no loyalty. And this goes all the way back to even the time of the Pharaoh. Fir'aun was a tabi'i government. And the Quran attests to this. In Surah Taha, chapter 20, verse 64, when Fir'aun was preparing for the showdown with Musa, and he gathered people from all over Egypt and beyond, because he was so confident, I will win this. He issued a statement before the showdown. This is Surah Taha, chapter 20, verse 64. He said, whoever has the upper hand today, he shall rightfully be the successful one. So that was the principle that he declared. But when he lost, he forgot that he had said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنِ اسْتَعْلَى. He said, this was a plot you plotted. This Musa, إِنَّهُ لَكَبِيرُكُمْ. You plotted this together. الَّذِي عَلَّمَكُمُ السِّحْرَ. He is the one who taught you this magic. And this plotting was done beforehand. وَمَكْرٌ مَكَرْتُمُوهُ فِي الْمَدِينَةِ. You see the same principle, that he first speaks and agrees. This is the rule. Whoever wins is right. But when he loses, now I will redefine what is right. Because the principle is very fluid. When Fitrah speaks, people in whom Fitrah is awakened, they will support it. But people who are Tabi'a driven will oppose it. And Fir'aun was the same. When Musa alayhi salam showed his miracles, the magicians submitted because their Fitrah was alive. So they recognized it. Fir'aun instead immediately began to threaten them. He said, this is Surah Shu'ara chapter 26 verse 29, that if you take any god besides me as your god, I will imprison you. And oppressors work on three principles. When your Fitrah first wakes up, they will ignore you. If you continue shouting and your Fitrah continues shouting, then they will ridicule you. And if it continues shouting, then they will oppress you. You look at the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, the same thing. The Quraysh first used to ignore him. He and Imam Ali, they used to stand near the Kaaba with Sayyidah Khadija, they used to pray salat, ignore them. It's just they're young people, they've got this cult going, it will die out, leave them. Then when it got more, they began to make fun of them. When it became even more, that's when the oppression and the torture began. And you will find that even now, if you've been following the news, what happened with the Occupy movements and protests? First, they were ignored. The news didn't cover it at all. And then when they covered, they started making fun of them. These are hippies. And then they began saying, this is not acceptable. You have to get out of here. This is a clear sign of tyranny. Now, capitalism says only the foolish and the backward believe in God. Communism says religion is the opium of the masses. Communism has collapsed. Capitalism is crumbling and falling apart. But Allah is still there. Religion is still there and will remain so. Why? Why? Because you are wired for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or tyrants, you will not be able to change this wiring. This is hard-coded. This is programmed in the soul of insan. You will either commit oppression or you will mask your oppression with fitrah. But fitrah will keep coming out again and again because it is hard-coded. It cannot be suppressed. He's accusing him of fasad and he is the fasid. Because when you accuse somebody of fasad, you put a mask. And this issue of labeling is how people also convince others. You see? If I call a Shia, then people will start wondering, Shia of who? Shia is a follower. Shia of Ali, where Ali was a good person. So don't call them Shia, call them Rafidi, renegades, so that people are turned away from them. In Surah Al-Baqarah, chapter 2, verse 11 and 12, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with this verse, Allah shows us that when a leader is tabi'a oriented, he is blind. He is so blind that even when you tell him and you show him he is wrong, he cannot see he is wrong. He thinks he is right and you are wrong. When it is said to them, do not cause corruption and mischief on the earth, they say, no, we are reformers. We are fighting for democracy. Indeed, it is they who are the mischief makers, but they do not even realize this because they call themselves reformers, they call themselves champions of justice, and they call everyone else rebels, renegades, fundamentalists, terrorists, radicals. The same idea of labeling. Once I call myself a reformer and I believe I'm a reformer, now I lose the ability to question and see, am I fitrah oriented or am I tabi'a oriented? Okay, so a tabi'a oriented leader will only survive by using fitrah oriented slogans. He cannot survive unless he uses fitrah-oriented slogans. A fitrah-oriented leader will always move towards tawheed. He will always move to the pleasure of Allah. A tabi'a-oriented leader at any level of human society will move to the pleasure of people, will always look at his own power and control and not look at surrender to Allah. Tawheed negates everything else except Allah. Shirk and dhulm does the opposite. It is not compatible with self-negation. It conflicts it with that because there is my own will, my own desire, and then there is Allah's will and Allah's desire. So we now have two separate systems. We have a tabi'a-oriented system and a fitrah-oriented system. These are two different movements. These are two different economies. These are two different ways of life. These are two different lives. These are two different deaths. Fitrah is first and foremost concerned with death. It first tackles the issue of death and then the issue of life. Fitrah does not rest until the fear of death has been overcome. Thereafter, it concerns itself with life because it knows this is temporary. Tabi'a, on the other hand, it swallows up the self. It does not think of death. It believes there is no death. It sees itself as a god. It does not want to surrender, whereas fitrah wants to surrender. It is for this reason that you will see that world powers constantly try to dominate each other because the leaders are worms and caterpillars. They are not butterflies. They only want reward. They want wealth. They want power. They want control. They want oil. A butterfly leader, that we said another name for him is al-insan al-kamil, is not interested in these things. So a fitrah-oriented leader will lead only because Allah has charged him with this task. So in surrender to Allah he leads. He is not greedy for it. To ask a butterfly to live amongst worms is painful because he feels caged. He feels he is living in hell. All the worms around him want to kill him. whereas he wants to be liberated, he wants to be free from that. He cannot tolerate living amongst worms. So fitrah submits to Allah's will if Allah delegates that power to it. Whereas tabi'a immediately and recklessly wants power. It does not stop to think. We gave this trust to represent us, Allah says, offered it to the heavens and the earth and the mountains, but they refused because they were afraid, they were apprehensive that we might not be able to fulfill this trust. But insan stood up immediately and said, I'll do it, I'll do it. Why? Because he is dhaluman jahula. He is unjust and he is reckless and he is ignorant in his tabi'a. When we are tabi'a oriented, we want power. Look at this again, make it relevant. We ask a question. That a tabi'a-oriented government, despite having all these weapons of mass destruction, despite having both these options of oppressing people or masking their tabi'a with fitrah, why are they still not able to dominate over the masses? Why do people's fitrah still wake up? Why? The reason is because when taghut, when rebels, when shaitan, when dhulm seeks to do this, when it tries to do this, the reason it cannot do this is because it is as futile as trying to prevent a fetus from being born. So once we have been addicted to physical pleasure, to comforts of the flesh, we will stop asking, our fitrah will stop asking for the milk of freedom and justice because we are addicted to the pacifier. I want to address one final question. If fitrah is so hardwired in human beings that it always comes out, why then is it so difficult for fitrah to dominate tabi'ah? Why? The first answer is that fitrah is constructive. Tabi'a is destructive. Construction requires effort. Construction requires coordination. Construction requires patience. Destruction does not require any of this. It is easy to do. It is easy to get addicted. But it is very difficult to come out of that addiction. Look at this in your own experience. Constructing a building may take months, but demolishing the building is very quick. Even when you're playing with your child at home, play with them with those blocks sometimes the way I do. Building that whole thing for me takes a long time. But when my little boy wants to destroy it, he just comes and knocks it. He doesn't need a lot of intelligence or logic or planning, and the whole thing crumbles. Tabi'a is destructive. Getting addicted is very easy. Coming out of it is difficult. This is why fitrah struggles to dominate tabi'a. That is one thing. The other thing is that tabi'a is, in our physical sense, natural, because we live in a physical cage, in a physical body, in a material world. And we have been with tabi'a from birth. Fitrah requires training. Fitrah requires maturity. To give you an analogy for this, it is like speaking and reading. Speaking comes naturally to children. Living with you, they learn how to speak. Reading does not come like that. You have to teach them to read. Children, until the age of 7 or 8 years old, they learn how to read, and then they read to learn. Above me here, there is Arabic calligraphy. There is a verse of Quran. If you do not know how to read Arabic, you can stare at this for 20 years. You will still not know what it says. But if I was to start talking to you in Arabic, again and again and again, after a while you will begin making out some words. And in time you will learn enough to get the gist of what I am saying. Tabi'a is like speaking. It comes to you naturally. Fitrah has to be trained. It has to be taught. The reins have to be taken into the hands. Yet, despite that, the miracle of fitrah is this, that when it comes about, tabi'a has to vanish. Because tabi'a is like a dark room. Fitrah is the light that comes in and fills that dark room. And that is why the Quran says in Surah Al-Isra, chapter 7, verse 81, tell them, when truth comes, falsehood has to vanish, because falsehood is a thing that is bound to perish. It is bound to vanish. It is this insan's foolishness that he does not realize you cannot destroy fitrah. You cannot mask tabi'a as fitrah and fool people. Sooner or later, they will wake up and they will overthrow you, whether you are Fir'aun or you are other than that. Do you not see how the snake, the stick and the staff of Musa always swallowed the serpents of the magicians? Fitrah will always swallow tabi'a. It is only a matter of when, not a matter of if.
Tinapos ni Brother Khalil ang lektura sa pagbibigay diin na ang fitrah ay hindi kailanman masisira. Maaring ito ay supilin, baluktutin o takpan, ngunit hindi ito kailanman mawawala. Ito ay nakaukit sa kaluluwa ng tao. Tulad ng isang sanggol na kailangang isilang, ang fitrah ay laging lilitaw. Ipinaliwanag niya na ang mga mapang-aping sistema ay sumusunod sa isang padron. Una, binabaliwala ang katotohanan. Ikalawa, kinukutya ito. At sa huli, sinusubukang supilin ito. Paulit-ulit itong nangyayari sa kasaysayan. Mula sa panahon ni Propeta Musa a.s. hanggang sa misyon ni Propeta Muhammad s.a.w.a.w. hanggang sa makabagong mundo. Ngunit sa kabila ng lahat, nananatili ang fitrah. Ang dahilan kung bakit tila nangingibabaw ang tabi'a ay dahil ito ang mas madali. Mas madali ang pagsira kaysa sa pagbuo. Mas madali ang pagkaalipin sa bisyo kaysa sa disiplina. Ang mga material na pagnanasa ay agad makamtan, samantalang ang espiritual na paglago ay nangangailangan ng pagsisikap, pagtitiis at pagsasanay. Ngunit nananatili ang isang di nagbabagong katotohanan. Kapag lumitaw ang katotohanan, mawawala ang kasinungalingan. Ipinapaalala ni Brother Khalil na ang fitrah ay tulad ng liwanag na pumapasok sa isang madilim na silid. Gaano man katagal ang dilim, sa sandaling pumasok ang liwanag, ito ay agad naglalaho. Sa parehong paraan, maaaring magmukhang makapangyarihan ang kasinungalingan, ngunit likas itong marupok. Ang pagbagsak nito ay hindi tanong kung mangyayari, kundi kung kailan. Tinapos niya sa isang malalim na katotohanan. Ang tao ay nilikha para kay Allah. Ang ugnayang ito ay hindi mabubura. Maaaring magbago ang mga sistema at ideolohiya, ngunit ang panawagan ng fitrah ay laging babalik. Gumagabay sa sangkatauhan pabalik sa katotohanan, katarungan, at sa huli kay Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Maraming salamat sa panunood. Kung nakita mong kapaki-pakinabang ang content na ito, huwag kalimutang i-like, i-follow at i-share. Sama-sama nating buuin ang isang komunidad kung saan lumalago ang mga ideya at naipapalaganap ang inspirasyon. Malaki ang nagagawa ng iyong suporta. Tuloy-tuloy lang tayo, isang click sa bawat hakbang.